Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Know by Year. Today's video is going to be a little bit of a candid chat about how I made the same mistake once again. So over the course of this Know by Year, I've been going through a lot of mental changes and emotional shifts as far as my attitudes towards shopping and how I receive influencers and sources of influence online and otherwise. And part of my journey has been sharing these realizations and these moments of change, these little pivots in my character perhaps. And sometimes I share these things in real time before I've had a chance to really evaluate and process the long-term effects perhaps of sharing some of these things, or whether or not the way that I share is actually in line with how I want to continue, how I want to operate in general. So part of it is being on social media as a whole is not something I'm hugely experienced with. Even in my personal accounts, I've never been somebody who's very active on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. I have an active TikTok for music content only, so I'm not really speaking personally. And my Instagram and Facebook are incredibly neglected, and really the functions of those for me serve primarily to use the messaging part of the apps to talk to friends. So this phenomenon of posting content, especially content that is so personal, and then receiving comments and feedback on it is fairly new for me. And I'm learning a lot in this process. And it's not, like I said, it's not skills that I've had prior to this experience. So I'm literally living and learning. And that's actually a wonderful thing, in my opinion. But inevitably, I'm going to make what one might call mistakes along the way. And I say it like that because it may or may not appear to be a mistake to somebody else, but I can look back and realize that some of the things I've said or done might have been mistakes for me. And again, I don't want to draw on the possible mumbo jumbo of a personality test, but it brings back to mind one of the cautions that I read in one of those personality assessments, where sometimes I can share an idea before I truly have worked it out, and it can seem like I'm saying I really believe that, when in reality I'm not quite there yet personally. And that's one of the weaknesses apparently of my personality type. Whether it's due to personality or not, I do think that is something that I've fallen into on this channel. Now, I'm not about to go and drop a huge bomb about things I no longer believe about, the Know by Year, or things that I've said, how to stop shopping. There's nothing that major or serious, but getting back to what I said at the beginning, I made the same mistake that I talked about making earlier on this channel. And let me recap the earlier mistake and share the parallels that I've made more recently. So earlier this year, I shared a story where I was talking not negatively, but rather objectively about some work colleagues to some friends of mine, also work colleagues. So I was talking to friends who I work with, basically about other people that we all work with, and we were all kind of expressing frustrations about some of the actions or behaviors of these people at that particular point in time. And we weren't bashing them, we weren't saying negative things, we weren't making character judgments, but there were some aspects that were frustrating about what we were experiencing at work due to some of these people and how they would show up. Again, I'm trying to be objective about it, and I'm getting a little bit of the ick rehashing it here, because talking about other people in that way is not a comfortable thing for me to do for many reasons. I mean, there are obviously many reasons why somebody might be going through a period of time where they might not be able to show up as prepared or as thoughtfully to any task, work or otherwise. The other thing about that incident is that after we had the conversation, I noticed another person that we work with at the coffee shop a few tables over who may have overheard our conversation. And I'm not sure that she did. I have since had conversations with that person, the person who was at the coffee shop, and we're all good. It's fine. She's, if anything, she's on the same page. She's also somebody who's experienced frustration before at work due to how some other people show up. So long story short, nothing bad happened as a result of that experience talking about other people, but I have been feeling a kind of parallel experience in the ways that I've shared my response to other people here online. And while I don't necessarily think I've made outright mistakes, because I've really tried to be careful not to make comments about somebody's character or personal judgments, but rather try to comment on my response to the things that they've done or said. And those things are not indicative of somebody's deep down true character, in my opinion. I don't think everything we do or say shows who we are. It can show aspects of who we are, but everybody might have a day where they are feeling a certain way, or they might have a day, I might have been having a day where I was feeling a certain way when I responded to these creators. And I will also tell you another secret. So I've talked about, 2 or 3 specific creators on this channel where I had moments, turning points where I realized that not all of their content is relevant to me anymore. And I used to be somebody who would watch everything they posted. So my little secret is that I'm actually still subscribed to all of these creators. And what I've learned is that I just no longer need to watch everything that they put out. I've learned to evaluate better whether their content is directed to be useful to me. And it doesn't mean that I don't like them as people, or that I've forgotten that they're humans as a whole. Even if in my isolated pieces of content, I might have presented a slightly different angle to that idea. And looking back and thinking about it and going through some of the comments I've received on some of that material, I realized that I'm not comfortable with that kind of discussion and scrutiny put onto other people based on me sharing my feelings and experiences based on their content. Now, the good news is I think I've moved on to a point where I've learned to evaluate content more carefully, and I won't need to bring these things up in the future of my channel. I think my points have been made. I'm not going to go take the videos down where I've shared my response to these things. If anything, like I said, I don't know that I've made true mistakes. I do hope that I spoke carefully enough and represented my true feelings enough, because like I said, I truly don't dislike any of these people. It's just a response to some of the content that they shared. The other thing is that even if I did make a mistake, I would rather this show up as a story of redemption and further realization and growth than something to be swept under the rug and hidden. And so I've learned that it's my choice about what media I consume, and it's also my choice how I talk about my reflections and whether or not I bring in other creators in anything but a positive way. I still think it's a wonderful thing to showcase positive examples in these creative spaces, and so I have no qualms about continuing to mention others in that way. And I guess the other thing that I'm learning is that I don't know whether engaging with every comment on my channel is going to be a possibility for me anymore. Part of it is just a time constraint. The fall season is approaching, which means my job will soon be resuming. And I also have some very important and stressful auditions on the horizon, which will start taking more and more of my time. So I will just have less time to be engaging with all of my comments. And to those of you who leave them, I'm still so appreciative of them. I could still read them all, which is wonderful. But I'm just not sure if I'll be able to respond thoughtfully to everyone. And I suppose that's just a natural development of an online presence and trying to balance that with life offline. That doesn't mean I won't continue to take feedback and think deeply about many of the comments that I do receive. In fact, you might have noticed the change in my background here. This is a result of a couple of comments kind of questioning whether having all of my purses behind me is helpful for the message of my channel. And I can see where that point is coming from, especially since I actually did intentionally set up this shelf area to look a little bit like a store display, like one of the comments mentioned. And that actually, it was intentional, partly because I thought, hey, if I have my purse collection displayed in my room like a store, then I will be able to enjoy them in that way of, having them artfully displayed, and I won't want to buy any more for myself. And I can't promise that this is going to stay like this. I will keep it up for the next couple of rounds of filming, and we'll see. We'll see how I feel about it after editing and looking back. But like I said, I take feedback seriously. I take the comments and chew them over in my own mind and see where it helps me land after processing. I have seen a couple of other comments, especially on these videos focused on the work of other creators, and my response suggesting that perhaps I am becoming a little overly judgmental and perhaps my pendulum has swung a little too far the opposite way. And to that I say, yes, it probably has. I have tried to remain non-judgmental, and I'm sorry, honestly. if I have appeared that way to anybody out there who's seen my content, it is far from the intention. I'm really just trying to show one person's journey after they've removed the option of purchase from their year going on a no-buy, and how this changes the response to that content. But I do think that the nature of a long-term challenge like this, of restriction, is that the pendulum is going to swing from the extreme over here to the extreme over here, from over-consuming to no-consuming. And so it kind of makes sense that my mentality has followed, right? I used to have the mentality of an over-consumer, and now I'm over here as a non-consumer in the extreme. I can't evaluate things to buy because I'm just not buying them. And while I haven't stuck to my no-buy perfectly, and so it's not a black and white thing, I don't believe many things in life are black and white in reality. While I haven't done a perfect no-buy, I have been trying to reshape my mentality as if I am on a no-buy, a perfect no-buy. And I do hope that this pendulum swing represents not diving into a deep black hole, but instead entering a tunnel where there's a light at the end, and when I emerge on the other side, I will arrive at a place of reason where I can sustainably exist, buying some things that I don't need and enjoying them, but doing it in a much more conscious way, being a conscious consumer. Or, like I've used the analogy before, taking the time as a caterpillar to go into this cocoon of reflection and then emerging as a butterfly who's free to fly around and engage with the world at large. The final thing I wanted to share in this video is that while it's been hilarious to recognize that I have repeated the same mistake of talking about other people in what I felt was an objective way, but can inevitably be misconstrued as judgmental or negative, and I obviously didn't learn from doing that the first time. Something that I have learned is that how one receives others is going to be highly dependent on where we are in our own lives, in our own goals, in our own journey. And again, this is perhaps an obvious point, but I thought of an analogy that summed it up for myself nicely, so I thought I would share here in case I happen to mention it in future content on this channel. So I was talking to a friend about this and realizing that when somebody comes to a video, could be my video, could be another person's video, everybody has their own life story up until that point. And when I'm sharing my life story, it's almost like I have a book club, for example. And in a book club, everybody is supposed to be reading the same book. And there's assigned chapters each week so that everybody arrives, more or less, on the same page. And when you're on the same page like that, you can discuss these things freely with the same background information and the same references and the same points of reference, the same life experience, so to speak, similar enough at least that the understanding is there. The understanding of the motivations is there. If somebody comes to that same book club and maybe they're reading the same book, but they've read ahead or they're behind, they don't have a lot of the valuable context that it takes to be able to talk about the subjects in the book with the same level of understanding. They might know too much. They might have already unveiled some key character points or plot points that the others don't know. They may not have read enough, and so when somebody talks about something happening at this point, they're just not quite there yet. It doesn't mean that the meeting is useless for them, it just means it's going to be received very differently. And it could still be very, very interesting, even if they don't have all of the knowledge. And then there might be somebody coming to the book club not having read that book at all. Perhaps they've read other books by the same author. Perhaps they haven't. But the point is, they're not even in the same book, let alone on the same page. And so in some of the comments on some of my videos, I have realized that perhaps some people are perceiving these things so differently because we're not quite on the same page or the same chapter, and in some cases, maybe not even reading the same book. For the majority of my comments, actually, the people who do share, it does feel like we're in the same book. If some of the comments are sharing further insights, perhaps they've read ahead or finished this book and are on to the next one in the series. And I'm fascinated, as always, to read comments from everybody, whether they're in the same book or not. But it does make me think about it with a little more perspective. And to also realize of myself, when I'm watching somebody else's content, if it's not ringing true for me, then it could just be that I'm not in that book anymore. Perhaps I've finished that book and I've moved on to a totally different genre of reading, and it doesn't mean that I don't get some enjoyment out of that anymore, but it's not going to have the revelations and the gripping nature of a new genre that I'm excited about, that I'm delving deeper into. I'm not going to be voraciously looking for other sources in the same field like I was before when I was super into this genre. So I just wanted to share that little analogy. And again, analogies are dangerous too, because there's always holes in them. There's always ways that they don't quite fit. So I'd be fascinated to know if you found any holes in that, and if you share them below, perhaps I can expand my own perspective on this idea as well. Anyway, that was a bit of a rambling, candid video. I shared the mistake that I've made multiple times, both in real life and here online, which is still real life in a way. I shared the analogy about being on the same page, the analogy about the black hole being a tunnel, hopefully turning into a butterfly, and I guess I'm just sharing that I'm learning as much about being online here in real time as I am about doing a no-buy here, and so I'm sorry for any mistakes that I might make. I'm sorry for moments that I share something that's not quite in line with what I want to share and don't realize that until after the fact. But thank you so much for staying with me and being on this path of learning and discovery with me, hopefully with the end goal of becoming a more conscious consumer. And I guess that also includes media, comments, opinions, and my consuming of those things as well. Let me know what you think of the background. You'll be seeing it in the next week's worth of videos, I think. Can't promise it'll stay, can't promise that it won't change, but here it is for now. And hopefully this channel will represent a general path of learning, redemption, and growth. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.